Anybody here through growing? I see a couple of people maybe older than me, not very many. But I'll tell you something, you know what? You're never through growing. Never. And just when you think you're done, I can guarantee you, you'll find out that you're not done. You'll learn something else, and that's always a good thing. I've also found out that you can never stop growing spiritually. I've been in Christian work since I was 19. So I realize that every day you can continue to learn things. And those things that you learn are sometimes uncomfortable because they cause you a challenge, because they force you to look at the areas of your life that maybe you've never looked at before, and maybe you are uncomfortable at looking at them. But one of the things that we looked at in step 4 was we made a list of all of our character defects. And I tell you, it's not easy taking a look at them, because you really have to take a look at yourself and the way you are, and that's not always easy. Because especially when we're young, I tell you, we don't think that we've got a care in the world. I remember when I was 19, went off to school, came back, I wanted to know who had taught my dad so much while I was away. Because suddenly my dad, who knew nothing, knew everything. I think it was largely because I found out how little I knew. And I'll tell you something, growing up with God is not always easy, but I tell you the end result is going to be wonderful. And what I want us to think about today in step 10, it's talking about taking daily inventories of our life. And those daily inventories are not easy because we would like not to have to do that. Because that means that we've probably done something today that we wish we hadn't done, said something that we probably wish we hadn't said, or cut off somebody on the freeway that we probably wished we hadn't cut off. The ushers are handing out something that I'd just like you to put down on the ground. We'll talk about it in a little bit, but they're giving you a little checklist that we'll talk about how to use this exercise a little bit later on this morning. I need one too, don't mind. I had one, but I don't know where it went. Okay. The Bible says in Psalms 34, verse 12, it says, "Whosoever loves life and desires to see many days, keep your tongue from evil and your lips from speaking lies." Oops. "Turn from evil and do good, seek peace and pursue it." How many have ever told an untruth? Don't raise your hands. How many told one today since you've been up? Don't raise your hands. How many told somebody, oh, they look great, when really they really didn't look great? You wondered if they owned a mirror when they left the house this morning. You just wanted to say, did you check the mirror out before you left? All those kinds of things. Having 4 daughters and, you know, them coming up and says, "Dad, do these jeans make my butt look big?" I would have to tell them, honey, it wasn't the jeans. Didn't want to tell the truth because those truth things hurt, don't they? But when we start to tell ourselves the truth, it's going to hurt too. But there will be some good that come from it when we begin to own up to those responsibilities that are ours. So we need to take a review of actions, thoughts, and unfortunately we also need to take a look at our motives. Our motives are what will really define who we are. You know what? I found a long time ago that if I would take care of other people, I would find myself being in a better place with God. So much so that I made a ritual out of taking care of other people. So much so that it became an undermining kind of motivation for me, because I got off on taking care of other people. And unfortunately, that's really the wrong motive. To do it because God tells us to take care of others is the reason, not because we felt proud that we took care of a lot of people today, or that we could actually help a lot of people. It was a good thing that we were able to do it, but not for the wrong reason. Some of the things in step 10 says it keeps us in touch with our behavior, and when we've done something wrong, to quickly admit it. How many have ever been quick to admit something that you've done wrong was wrong? I had an occasion a few weeks ago to where I had to call somebody in the church and apologize to them, because I had made an assumption that wasn't true. I'd made an assumption that something was fully communicated to somebody by their actions. Well, you know what? Actions don't always tell the truth. And I had to call this individual up and I had to apologize because I had made an assumption that an information had been passed on. They were acting like it had been passed on. I was under the assumption it was passed on. Sooner or later I found out, you know what, that was not the case. And I had to go and apologize for it. Apologizing doesn't always make things right, though, because it takes somebody on the other side willing to receive that apology and act on that apology and act as though they forgive you. And that means that their motivation has to come to the place where, you know, and their understanding and their maturity level has to come to the place where, you know what, I accept it, and yeah, I was momentarily hurt and injured by what you did, but you know what, we are all growing up and we give opportunity for each other to make strides to go forward. I'll tell you something, when you make a mistake, you have got to do what is right before God, not before anybody else. And expect the other person to be mature enough to say, you know what, I accept it because I've made mistakes. And the older you get, the more mistakes you're liable to think about. Every day I think about things that I wished I had done differently. I tell people all the time, if I just had 60 seconds, I could go back and change every bad decision I've ever made my whole life, because I have rehearsed it so many times, all those mistakes. And that's when you have to remember that you have to learn to forgive yourself. I think a lot of times we lack self-forgiveness because we continue to beat ourselves over the head because of the mistakes we've made. When in reality, you know what? Those are way back there, and if I continue to look in the rearview mirror, I will miss the things that are in front of me. When I was in high school, I wasn't much of a track star. As a matter of fact, I didn't like track at all. I could barely run. So I was in the band, and we marched, and we marched, and we marched, and we did all those kinds of things. But I was never really good at track, even though we had to run things for PE and stuff like that. But a friend of mine was really, really good at it. And he wasn't always good, but he learned how to be good. And he was learning the high jump, not the high jump, excuse me, the hurdles and high hurdles. And he was running, and the coach said, don't look back if you tip one over. It's okay, just keep running. Well, for the longest time, he would run and run and run and run, and then towards the end, he would get a little lazy, and his foot would drag and hit and pull one down, and he would look back. And you could watch him as he plowed through 2 or 3 more in front of him and end up on the ground because he just hit the next ones blowing and going, so to speak. Well, he learned that if he looked back, he would constantly continue to make the same mistake. He had to look to improve on the next opportunity, on the next opportunity, on the next opportunity. We're all going to make mistakes. We're all going to make them. The quick we learn not to look back and to keep our eyes going forward, the better off we're going to be. Romans 12:13 says, for by the grace given to me, I say to every one of you, don't think of yourself more highly than you ought, but rather to think of yourself with a sober judgment in accordance with the measure of faith that God has given you. So I want you to think about it today. I want you to think about honesty to yourself and not to me. This isn't about me. But if you can be honest with yourself today, I can guarantee you that you will grow big in God. Got some questions for you. Several weeks ago, I asked you to start making a list of your character defects. And my question to you is, how many of you actually did that? Don't raise your hands. It's not about me, it's about you. How many of you are aware of your own character defects and are doing something about them? How many of you made a list of those that you injured by those defects that I asked you to do a few weeks ago? And how many of you have gone to seek those out and to ask forgiveness for those? You see, I'm a firm believer that you can hear God every day. I think you can hear and hear and hear and hear and hear. The Bible says you can hear. But if you don't act on it, you're not going to be wise at all. You know, you're like that person who builds their house, the Bible says, on the sands. That when the winds come and the seas come in, it undermines all that because there's no real structure that's been built. But he says, those people that hear my words and then go and do it, he says, is a wise person. That they built their house on a rock. that can't be moved. So I want to challenge you today. You know what? If you haven't made a decision, that I want to write down all the things that are my character defects, my defaults, the things that I run to when things get bad. I guarantee you that you'll continue to do those same things over and over again that aren't going to help you. They're not going to get you anywhere. It's only when you take a good look into that mirror and you say, God, show me all the things that you want me to be better at. And I tell you, He'll reveal those things. Matthew 5, if you want to look at something, Matthew 5, verse 25 and 26. How many of you have ever had an enemy? Anybody ever had an enemy? I know I have. You know, there's a statement that says if you've got an enemy, you made them. We actually do. You know, people are not born to become your enemy. Something we've done creates that animosity, and we've got to remember that that's our ownership. We own that situation. It's our responsibility. And here in Matthew chapter 5, verse 25 and 26, it says, settle matters quickly with your adversary who is taking you to court. Do it while you're still with him on the way, or he may hand you over to the judge, and the judge may hand you over to the officer, and you may be thrown into prison. And I tell you the truth, you will not get out until you have paid the last penny. So when we've got somebody that's upset with us, you know, the best thing to do is just to go to them real quickly and just say, you know what? Let's hash this out. Let's get it fixed. Why are we going to continue on and on and on in this? Because first off, you probably had something to do with it. So seek forgiveness quickly. The freer you are to give that forgiveness that you need from someone else, you're going to give it to them as well, and all good things will come. How many have ever been angry? This will be a good show of hands here. Thank you for some of you being honest. The rest of you we're going to pray for before the service is over. We'll cast out the spirit of lying. We've all been angry at some point in time. I was really angry with the police officer who wouldn't let us cross today. I rolled down the thing, and I wanted to give him such a piece of my mind. And I said, I need every piece, so I don't dare give it away. But asked him, I said, you know, how can you do this? How can you cut people off from what they need to be doing? He said, well, we didn't cut you completely off. We just cut you off right here. I said, no, there is not a place. And they couldn't tell us, well, you could go down here and maybe try that. And I said, see, you don't even know. And we pay for that ignorance in our taxes, don't we? That's when I get really upset. Ephesians 4 makes a statement here in Ephesians 4:25. It says, therefore, each of you must put off falsehood and speak truthfully to his neighbor, for we are all members of one body. In your anger, do not sin. I've always wondered how to do that. I'm still working on that. Do not let the sun go down while you're still angry. And do not give the devil a foothold. So does that mean if I'm angry, that's giving the devil a foothold? If I hold on to that anger, do I sleep well at night? No, I lose sleep. Do I work well the following day? Probably not. Do I get in trouble with my employer because I didn't work well? Probably. So there is this domino effect. If I continue to be angry with someone, the only person that's hurting is me. No one else even probably knows. That police officer, I was probably the lightest of the insults that he had today, along with all the others on Turtle Creek and on that way down. Don't give place to the devil. Don't give him a foothold. He who has been stealing must steal no longer. Does that mean that stealing kind of goes along with anger? Have you ever been so mad at somebody you decided to take something for somebody else? Like their self-esteem? Yeah. But must work, doing something useful with his hands so that he may have something to share with those in need. I'll tell you something, there's going to be situations that come against your integrity, your commitment.